what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to NRW. I'm your host today, Rob the Movie Guy, and I thank you very much for joining me here today. And as you can see from the intro, I'm doing the review for the comedy classic in the film, Coming to America. And I'm doing this review in anticipation for the sequel, Coming to America, that will be released on Amazon Prime on March 5th. So by the time this video gets uploaded on the channel, it should be released on the same week as the film. And for me, this movie easily is in my top 5 of greatest comedies of all time. And I'm sure if you ask a lot of people who have grown up with this movie back in the late 80s, early 90s, they would probably do the same as far as putting in the top 5 greatest comedies of all time, because this movie is fucking hilarious and it's still one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And what can be said about this movie that hasn't already been said before? Because I'm sure many of you guys out there who have already seen this film, probably many of you guys already know the history of what it took to make the film and what occurred during the production of the making of the film, and then the impact that it had in pop culture since its release. I'm sure many of you guys may already know of the relationship that Murphy had with the cast members, and including the director John Landis, and several other different stories that have been shared throughout the years with all the cast members and people behind the scenes. So there's really nothing new that I think I can add to this other than my own experience with this film. So let's get started with the plot of this movie. And I had briefly touched upon about the director in the legendary John Landis, who has directed several classics in the industry with films such as The Blues Brothers, and we also have the American Horror Classic in An American Werewolf in London, and of course Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, and one of my personal favorites of his in Spies Like Us. So the film follows the story of Prince Akeem Joffer, played by Eddie Murphy, who is preparing to be married with his arranged bride-to-be on his 21st birthday, and he is becoming weary of his pampered lifestyle and wants to do more with himself. And upon meeting his arranged bride-to-be, he starts to realize that he is not wanting to be with a woman who's going to cater to his every need, but rather be with an independent woman who can think for herself. And Akeem decides to go to America with his good buddy Semi to Queens, New York, in hopes to find a potential queen for himself, for someone that's going to love him for him, not because of his wealth or his royalty background. And while they're in New York City, Akeem would like for himself and Semi to appear as poor foreign students to not raise any suspicions of their wealth while they're in the city. And along the way, they do become acquainted with some people in the area, and one of them tells them of a local rally that's happening that evening for them to meet some potential women. And he does come across a beautiful woman in the name of Lisa, who he finds out works at a local restaurant called McDowell's that is owned by her father. And both Akeem and Semi do end up working at the McDowell's restaurant, and along the way, Akeem has to overcome some hurdles where he discovers that Lisa does have a boyfriend in a man by the name of Daryl, and he's also trying to win the approval of Lisa's father. And even though Lisa's father does take a liking to Akeem along the way, he does not approve of their relationship, especially the fact that Akeem had told Lisa that he comes from a very poor background, from a family of goat herders. And for Semi, who is used to much more pampered lifestyle back at home, he disapproves a great deal of the living conditions that him and Akeem are living in right now. So he decided goes out of his way to spend money on making the place much more to his liking, and much to the disapproval of Akeem, he orders Semis to find another place that is much worse than the previous conditions that they were in before, so that way Lisa doesn't get any suspicions about their wealthy background. And out of desperation, Semi does write a letter to the royal family back at home, and he's asking them to send them more money over in the United States. And out of concern, the royal family do arrive in the United States, much to Semi's surprise, and they soon discover what was really going on this entire time while they were both staying in New York City. And Akeem's parents learn about his relationship with Lisa, and his father goes out of his way to speak with Lisa to tell her that she and Akeem can no longer be in a relationship anymore, because Akeem is going to go back over to Zamunda, marry his bride-to-be over there, therefore they can no longer see each other at that point. And this obviously surprises and angers Lisa, because she realizes that Akeem had lied to her about his life this entire time, and she feels betrayed by him. And Akeem does go after her and apologizes to her and tells her that he had to lie to her because he didn't want her to fall in love with him or like him just because he is of a royal family and has a lot of money. She tells him that, I don't care about that, I like you as a person, but you lied to me, therefore I can't trust you and I don't want to be with you. And this obviously saddens Akeem as well, and he goes back to Africa to expect to marry the bride-to-be that he had met in the beginning of this movie. And to his surprise, he realizes that Lisa's at the wedding and they're both actually going to get married. And that is pretty much where the film ends right there. There are so many detailed plots that I've left out that I just cannot cover for this review because there's just so much to talk about here. But I will get into my positives, and believe it or not, there are some negatives I do have about this movie, so let's just get right into it. The first positive I want to point out is something that I said in the beginning of this review. I had said that Coming to America is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life, but I truly do believe that Coming to America is one of the greatest comedies ever made. And a lot of it has to do with Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy, for me, is one of the greatest actors of all time. I truly do believe that he is up there with some of the greats, with the likes of Daniel Day-Lewis, Gary Oldman, Meryl Streep, among many others. I seriously do believe that he belongs to be a part of that list because his performances in this movie is nothing short of genius, because he is so good with each of these characters that he plays. And a lot of it has to do with the makeup effects, of course, done by the legendary Rick Baker. I think that with what he's able to deliver and providing a distinct set of voices for each of those characters, by the way that they move, certain cadences, the way that they handle themselves around the environment that they're in, there's something so distinct about them that you can't really tell that it is Eddie Murphy. Of course, once you know that it is him, you can see the facial structure, knowing that it's him for the most part. But I'm sure anyone who would watch this movie for the very first time, not knowing anything about Eddie Murphy at all, if they were to watch this film, I truly do believe that they would have no idea that each of those characters that he plays in this film, that they're all done by the same actor. I mean, you have Randy Watson, you have the Jewish guy at the barbershop, you have the barbershop himself, and I mean, it's just pure genius, and it's just a work of art. And I can't help but just be in awe of watching such incredible performances in this wonderful comedy. And while we're on the topic of Eddie Murphy, the character that he plays in Akeem, I love that guy. He's such a likable guy, and you understand his motivations for wanting to find true love, not being catered to it all the time, and really wanting to be with somebody who is independent and not relying on him to do everything for her rather. And you really do connect with him from the very beginning of this movie. There's a certain innocence about the character as well too that makes him very likable, and being this ridiculous situation that he's in, but somehow he's always finding a positive light throughout the negativity that he's experiencing in certain occasions throughout the film. And I always love how he handles himself in those situations, especially when he disagrees with somebody and does not want to tolerate their ignorance in certain situations. And I always admired about that with his character. And we can't forget about Arsenio Hall. Like Eddie Murphy in this film, he plays a different set of characters, where he plays the Reverend in the movie. He also plays the other barber in the barbershop alongside Eddie Murphy. And like Murphy himself, he is very, very good with his performances, where he puts on a distinct voice for each of these characters. And of course, the makeup done by Rick Baker helps out a great deal. But the way that he moves as these characters, like Eddie Murphy, he is so good at creating a whole different set of personalities for which each of these characters that he's playing. And to be honest with you, I'm very surprised he hasn't been acting a lot. The only thing I remember seeing him after I had seen Coming to America in was a TV show that he had done alongside Sammo Hung called Martial Law. And then after that, I don't recall seeing him in anything else since then, up until when I saw Black Dynamite, which he had a little small part in that film. And so I was very happy that he agreed to come back for the sequel, so I'm looking forward to see what he's going to be doing in that film as well. And the relationship between Lisa and Akeem is also one of the major highlights for me in this movie. When you first see that Akeem takes notice of Lisa at that rally, it's quite obvious he's very attracted to her physically, but he's also very attracted to her in an intellectual level. And a lot of it has to do with how she carries herself, and that sets her apart from all the other women that Akeem has encountered in the past. She has a very strong set of morals, a good set of values as well. She's very smart, and it comes from a very genuine spot where you see that Akeem is trying to earn her respect, earn to be with her in a relationship, a loving relationship at that, even going as far as to trying to earn her father's approval, even though that Lisa's father doesn't want Akeem and Lisa to be together, given that Akeem had said he comes from a very poor background. So when they go through the hurdles that they go through in the film, it comes from a very honest spot, and you believe every step of the way that these characters love each other and that they want to look out for one another. They accept each other for who they are, not for their wealth or who their parents are. It's really just about the individual, and I love that about this couple. So I was very happy to see them come together at the very end, even though I knew it was going to happen. But it comes from a very honest position, and every single time I watch the film, I still connect with the characters from the very beginning all the way to the very end. One important element that I don't want to forget about this film is then the score to this movie, and a lot of it has to do with the composer in this film, Nile Rodgers, who happens to be one of the co-founding members of the group Chic. And I think he does a great job with the score to this film. In fact, he's also responsible for creating one of the most memorable songs you'll ever hear in your entire life, for the song Soul Glow. That song is part of the pop cultural lexicon now, because once you hear that song, you can never forget it. And it also makes it more hilarious too with the commercial that you see in the film when you see Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall walk by. So it's very, very hilarious in how the song is put together, and then you have the visuals to match with that as well. Although this movie is set in the 80s, it's still a very timeless story. You can watch the film right now and not be distracted by the 80s aesthetic, because the characters in the films are so good, the story is well written, and the execution for everything with regards to the comedy, the romance, the dramatic side of it, and everything else that makes this film a timeless piece works so good. And a lot of it has to do with the director, John Landis. And I believe he did a really good job in giving the film scope, making it feel very epic, especially during the scenes that take place in Zamunda, because you definitely see the landscape and seeing how grand this kingdom looks. And a lot of it has to do with the set designs, of course, and of course the costumes, because they are all beautiful. And there's a beautiful sequence that happens in the beginning of the movie that involves a group of dancers doing a wonderful dance choreography, which is beautifully shot, and the costumes that they're wearing is also beautiful as well. And I remember the first time I saw it being really intrigued by it, and to this day I still think it's one of the most beautifully shot dance sequences I've ever seen on film. So I think John Landis did a really good job in showing the scope of this film and capturing it in one of the most amazing ways, especially for a film that is a comedy. And in closing with the positives, there are so many great things about this film. I mean, the comedy is top notch in this movie. There are so many memorable lines, memorable moments in the film, and there's just way too many things to go over and to describe what it is that makes this film so good, because there's virtually every single minute of this film is fantastic. And this movie is almost 2 hours long, and not once did I ever feel that length of the 2 hours there. It flies by very quickly. And as I've already mentioned before, there's so many funny things about this film. There's one line that always sticks out for me the most when it comes to some of the most memorable things about this movie, and that's the good morning scene.
Good morning, my neighbors! Hey, fuck you! Yes! Yes! Fuck you too!
And that's a great thing about this movie, because like that scene you just saw right there, there are so many memorable moments like that happens throughout the entirety of this film. And when it comes to the punchlines being delivered in this movie, in my opinion, I think the film does a really good job in delivering them flawlessly, especially when it comes to the McDowell scenes. And for anyone out there that may not know this, the restaurant that was used during the making of this film was a Wendy's restaurant that was located out in Queens Boulevard in New York. And I just recently read a headline that the restaurant was shut down back in 2013, I believe. So it goes to show you how impactful this movie really was for a local newspaper to go out of their way to report on the restaurant shutting down, and even going as far as interviewing all the locals and anyone else that had passed through just to visit that restaurant after watching this movie. And I think the movie does a really good job in delivering the comedy, because I think in that it's really where its strengths are, but it's not a perfect film by any means. So this is a perfect segue for me to get into the negatives. And for the negatives, for me, the sticking point is with the African accents that James Earl Jones, Eddie Murphy, and Arsenio Hall puts on, because whenever they speak, you can hear their American accents come in and out just about every single time they speak. And although I've never noticed this before with the previous times I've watched this movie, it wasn't until when I was watching this film for the purposes of the review where it became very apparent for me. And despite that major flaw, it never really distracted me from the movie at all. It was very noticeable for me, but I was never taken out of the film because the film overall is so good that I was able to easily overlook that. And as far as any other negatives are concerned, there's really nothing that sticks out for me. And I don't even know if this would be considered a negative, but I would have liked to have seen more with the relationship between Akeem and his parents, because in the beginning of the movie, you see Akeem and his father have a wonderful conversation between themselves, and it's very obvious they do have a very strong relationship. And then at the end of the movie, you have a moment where Akeem is talking to his mother, and it's very obvious that these two have a very strong relationship as well. So I would have liked to have seen more of that, but I understand that since there's so much going on in this movie that it probably would be taking too much time away from the film, and it was probably just sprinkled enough for you to feel that impact, because that's how I felt that the connection was so strong, because the performances between the two actors as these characters is so good that that's what I felt right away with them. And I don't have anything else I can think of right now that is negative about the movie, so this is a perfect segue for me to get into my rating. And if you can't tell by now, I love this movie. There's a lot of details about this film that I just did not mention at all, because I can go on for hours about what it is that makes this film so great. So I strongly urge you guys out there to watch this movie, especially if you've never seen this film. So with that being said, I give this movie a solid cheers. And those are my thoughts on the film. If you have seen this movie, let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. I'd be really curious for anyone out there who had seen this film and did not like it at all. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and also be sure to share and like our videos, and also hit that notification button down below. And follow us on our social media accounts. We have a Facebook and Instagram page at New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. And you can also follow me on my social media accounts. On Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob the Movie Guy. And thank you all very much for joining me here today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time everybody, stay safe out there, and cheers.